Hello everyone, I'm Canon Beverley and I'm here with a thought for the week. And this week I'm thinking about courage. Now I grew up with the word courage, mainly because my nana and granddad had a pub and it belonged to a company whose name was Courage. And so their pub had the words "Take Courage" in big letters right along the side of the building. And I used to think about courage and what it meant. I liked the story of Joshua. It was a story that helped me to think about courage. I wonder if you've heard of Joshua from the Bible. For a lot of his life, Joshua was an assistant to perhaps the greatest leader that God's people ever had, Moses. Moses led God's people out of Egypt, away from the slavery and the hardship and the awful things. Moses must have needed a lot of courage to do that, mustn't he? Because he had to stand up to Pharaoh. And when Pharaoh said, "No, no, no," Moses had to say, "But I'm still going to keep asking." Until finally Pharaoh said, "Oh, yes, all right then, take your people and go." And some terrible things had happened. And more difficult things happened too. Now God had said to Moses, "I'm going to take your people to a wonderful land, a land of milk and honey, a land where everyone will be happy." But when Moses got there with the people, and they sent some people ahead to have a look, they realised that there would be some difficulties. They might have to fight for the land. They might have to try new things and go to new places and do things that were not familiar. It wasn't going to be easy, and so they got scared. God's people started to imagine that it was even worse than was really the case. They imagined that this special land was full of giants who would crush them. Well, that wasn't true, but it was because they let their fears and their anxieties about change and new things get out of hand. And so God's people ended up staying in the wilderness, in the desert area, for 40 years. That's a very long time. That would be as if when I was just a little girl, perhaps the age of you, I'd gone into a wilderness and I only came out last week. As a grown-up with grey hair. That was horrible. But while they were in the wilderness, wandering around, because they were too afraid to go to the promised land, Moses chose an assistant, and that was Joshua. And Joshua's job would be to help the people get over their fears and get some courage and go to that promised land where they would realise that there weren't any giants. It really wasn't that scary. Of course it would be difficult. There would be challenges. There would be new things. But they didn't need to be afraid. And so eventually that was Joshua's job. And Moses gave him a blessing and said, "Be strong and of good courage, for you must go with this people into the land that the Lord said he would give to their ancestors, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." When I think about that phrase, take courage, it's quite an active one. Now, obviously, when I've learnt that phrase as a little girl, it was about a pub that my grandparents owned. But when we think about taking courage, it's choosing to be courageous. So when we feel fearful or anxious about something, we choose to be courageous. We choose courage instead of running away, to face up to what we fear. Joshua took the people and faced it. And when they went into the new promised land, there were some difficulties and they had to have some fights and battles, but there weren't any giants. It really wasn't as bad as they'd imagined. And actually, it was as lovely as God had promised. And God's people settled down and were happy there. Sometimes we let the things we're anxious about, the things we fear, get out of hand, don't we? Now, some fear is very healthy, but we can let it get on top of us. One of the times I need to take courage most is if I'm near water, because, let me tell you something, I'm scared of water. Not any old water. I mean, I can run a tap or have a shower, that's fine. But the chances are, if you took me into a swimming pool, I could have a panic attack. It really scares me. Now, it's partly because I didn't learn to swim very well when I was little, and because when I was a young girl, I once got swept out to sea, so that was really quite scary. And so now, if I'm in a lot of water, perhaps in a swimming pool, somewhere like that, I get very scared. I have to take courage and tell myself it will be all right. I have to remind myself if I go to a swimming pool that there are lots of people who are qualified to help me if I got into trouble. And that actually I can swim, maybe not very well, but I can swim, so I'll be all right. But I have to take courage. It would be very easy to let my fears say, I'll never ever in the whole of my life get in a swimming pool again. But that would be a bit sad, wouldn't it? I wonder if there are things that you're scared of. Do you need to take courage? We have to try not to be discouraged. It would be very easy for me to listen if someone said to me, oh, well, you're a rubbish swimmer and you're afraid of water. Never ever get in a swimming pool again. I don't know why you keep that swimming costume in your drawer. You shouldn't keep it, Canon Beverley. I could be discouraged and get rid of my swimming costume and choose never to think I'll get in a pool again. But wouldn't it be better to take courage? What about you? Can you be as brave as Joshua? If there's something that scares you or that you're anxious about, can you be courageous and face up to it? Because it's easy to let what we imagine about things that are hard turn into imaginary giants and let them stop us from doing things instead of being people of courage. When I was a child, I was in a church choir, and at the end of every church service, the rector of the church always said the same prayer of blessing. I loved that prayer of blessing, and I still do. And it was a prayer that we should be courageous people, and quite a lot of other things too. And so as we come to our time of prayer today for the end of this service, of this thought for the week, I'm going to say his prayer. It's a prayer that people have said in the church for hundreds of years, and it's based on something St. Paul said. So it's a very old prayer. Are you ready? Shall we pray? Go forth into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to that which is good. Don't do to anyone evil for evil. Strengthen anyone who is feeling discouraged. Support the weak. Help people who are needy. Respect everyone. Love and serve God, rejoicing in his power. And the blessing of God be with you always. Don't be discouraged. Face your fears. Don't let other people tell you you can't do things. But this week, take courage. Bye-bye.